I remember the exact moment because nothing about it felt real. It was a Tuesday morning, 7:42 a.m. I was standing in my kitchen, holding my phone in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My daughter had already left for school, and the only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator behind me. I opened my banking app the way I had done hundreds of times before. Not out of fear, not out of urgency, just routine. I expected to see the same number I had seen a few days earlier, $42,618. That number wasn't random. It was 15 years of work. 15 years of saying no to vacations, 15 years of driving the same truck, 15 years of choosing safety over comfort. But that morning, the number was different. It said 0. Not lower, not reduced, 0. At first, I thought it was a loading error. My thumb hovered over the screen as I refreshed the app. Once, twice, 3 times. 0. My stomach dropped, but my mind refused to catch up. There had to be a mistake. Banks didn't just lose money, not like that. I set the coffee down slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, something else might break. My hands felt numb, like they didn't belong to me anymore. I logged out of the app and logged back in. 0. I checked the account number to make sure I hadn't accidentally opened the wrong one. No, it was mine. Same account, same routing number, same name. Just no money. I remember standing there longer than I should have. Maybe a minute, maybe 5. Time didn't feel normal anymore. It stretched in strange ways like my brain was trying to delay the truth. Because the truth didn't make sense. I hadn't made any large purchases. I hadn't transferred anything. I hadn't even touched the account in weeks. That money wasn't meant to be used. It was meant to sit there, to protect me, to protect my daughter, to protect whatever future we still had left. And now, it was gone. My first instinct wasn't panic. It was denial. There had to be a logical explanation, a processing delay, a system glitch, something temporary. Banks were reliable. That's what I had always believed. That belief had shaped every financial decision I had made since my divorce 6 years earlier. When everything else in my life had fallen apart, that account was the one thing I controlled. I built it slowly. Overtime shifts, skipped holidays, extra weekend work when my body begged for rest. Every deposit was a promise to myself that I wouldn't end up dependent on anyone again, that I wouldn't have to ask for help, that I wouldn't have to feel powerless. And now, staring at that 0, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Vulnerable. I opened the transaction history. At first, nothing looked unusual. A few small automatic payments, utilities, insurance, normal things. Then I saw it. A transfer. Dated 3 days earlier. Amount, $42,618.47. Destination, external account. My chest tightened. I didn't recognize the account number. I didn't authorize any transfer. I hadn't even logged into the app that day. I stared at the screen, hoping my brain would correct itself. Maybe I was misreading it. Maybe it was reversed. Maybe it was pending. But it wasn't. It was completed. Final. Irreversible. I felt a cold wave move through my body. Not panic. Not yet. Something worse. Confusion. Because money doesn't just disappear. Someone had to move it. Someone had to authorize it. Someone had to know it existed. I was the only one who had access. At least, that's what I thought. I tried to remember the last time I shared my banking information. I was careful. Always careful. Ever since the divorce, trust wasn't something I gave easily. Not with people. And definitely not with money. But as I stood there in that quiet kitchen, staring at a number that used to represent safety, one thought began to push its way forward. What if this wasn't a mistake? What if someone had taken it? And worse, what if I had unknowingly allowed it to happen? I didn't move for a long time. My eyes stayed locked on the screen, staring at that transfer like it might disappear if I waited long enough, like it might correct itself out of pity. But it didn't. It stayed there, permanent, final. I forced myself to breathe and tapped on the transaction for more details. Transfer type: external ACH transfer. Status: completed. Date: 3 days ago. Time: 2:14 a.m. 2:14 a.m. I was asleep at 2:14 a.m. I knew exactly where I was. In my bed, in my house, with my phone on the nightstand, untouched. Which meant one thing: someone else had authorized it. My fingers suddenly felt heavy, like they didn't want to cooperate. I navigated to the account settings, scanning for any unfamiliar connections. That's when I saw it. A linked external account. The last 4 digits didn't belong to anything I recognized. I stared at it, trying to force a memory that wasn't there. I had never added that account. I would never add an external account without double-checking everything. That wasn't how I operated. Not anymore, not after everything I'd been through. My heart started beating faster, not out of panic, but out of realization. This wasn't a bank error. This was access, unauthorized access. I grabbed my keys and wallet without thinking. My coffee was still sitting on the counter, untouched, already going cold. The nearest bank branch was 15 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. Every red light felt personal, like the universe was deliberately slowing me down. My mind raced through possibilities. Had I clicked something I shouldn't have? Had I entered my information somewhere unsafe? Had someone been watching me? I couldn't find a single answer that made sense. When I walked into the bank, the air conditioning hit me immediately. Cold, artificial, controlled. The exact opposite of how I felt. The woman at the front desk greeted me politely, the same way they always do. Calm, professional, unaware that my entire sense of security had just collapsed. "I need to speak to someone about my account," I said. She nodded and asked me to wait. Waiting felt unbearable. Every second felt like another confirmation that the money wasn't coming back. Eventually, a man in his late 40s called my name and led me into a small office. He introduced himself as Daniel, branch manager. He sat across from me, hands folded, posture calm. "How can I help you today?" he asked. I handed him my phone. "My account was emptied," I said. He looked down at the screen, then back at me. His expression didn't change immediately, but I could see something shift behind his eyes. Recognition. Concern. He turned his monitor toward himself and began typing. The room was silent except for the sound of his keyboard. After about 30 seconds, he stopped. "I do see the transfer," he said carefully. My chest tightened. "I didn't authorize it." He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "We'll need to review how the transfer was initiated." That sentence stayed with me. How the transfer was initiated, not if. How. Which meant in their system, it looked legitimate. He asked me a series of questions. Had I shared my login credentials? No. Had I given anyone access to my phone? No. Had I clicked on any suspicious emails? Not that I remembered. He listened, nodding, typing notes into his computer. But his tone remained neutral, professional, distant. "We'll open an investigation," he said. "These cases can take some time." "How much time?" I asked. "It varies." That wasn't an answer. I could feel frustration starting to rise beneath the surface. "That's my life savings," I said. He didn't argue with that. He just nodded again. "I understand this is difficult." Difficult. The word felt inadequate. Difficult was a flat tire. Difficult was a delayed flight. This wasn't difficult. This was devastating. I left the bank without real answers, just a case number and a quiet promise that someone, somewhere, would look into it. The drive home felt different, heavier, because now it wasn't just confusion, it was reality. Someone had accessed my account, someone had moved my money, and the bank wasn't immediately telling me they could get it back. That's when a new thought entered my mind. Not about the bank, not about the transfer, about access. Because transfers like that don't happen randomly. They require authentication, verification, authorization. Which meant whoever did this didn't just know my account existed, they knew how to get into it. And suddenly the question wasn't just what happened, it was when it started. Because access like that doesn't appear overnight. It builds slowly, quietly. And I began to wonder if the moment I saw zero wasn't the beginning of something that had already been set in motion. That night, I didn't sleep, not even close. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every financial decision I'd made over the past year. Every login, every password reset, every moment I had trusted a system I didn't fully understand. Somewhere in that timeline, something had gone wrong. I just didn't know where. Around midnight, I got out of bed and walked into the living room. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. It kept circling the same question. How? I picked up my laptop and logged into my email account. If someone had accessed my bank, there had to be a trail. Password resets, notifications, something. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw it. An email from my bank. Subject line: "Your contact information has been updated." Date: 4 days ago. I froze. I opened it slowly, already knowing it wasn't going to say what I wanted. The message was short. "Your phone number has been successfully updated. If you did not make this change, please contact us immediately." I stared at the screen, trying to remember updating my phone number. I hadn't. My number had been the same for 8 years, which meant someone else had changed it. My chest tightened as the realization hit me. If they changed the phone number, they could receive verification codes, which meant they could approve transfers, which meant they didn't need my phone. They became me. I checked my bank profile again. The phone number listed wasn't mine. I felt a wave of anger rise in my chest, not loud anger, quiet anger, the kind that settles deep and doesn't leave. Because this wasn't random, this was deliberate. Whoever did this didn't just guess a password, they went through the process, step by step, changing information, establishing access, building control, and I hadn't noticed. That realization hurt more than the money itself, because I had always believed I was careful. Careful with trust, careful with access, careful with my future. But careful wasn't enough. The next morning, I called the bank again. I explained what I found, the updated phone number, the unauthorized change. The woman on the phone listened carefully. Then she said something that stayed with me. It appears the changes were made using correct authentication. Correct authentication. In their system, whoever did this had answered the right questions, entered the right codes, followed the right steps, which meant from their perspective, it looked legitimate. I felt the weight of that truth settle in, because banks don't operate on feelings. They operate on verification. And verification had been completed by someone who wasn't me. Later that afternoon, I received another call, this time from the bank's fraud department. The man on the phone spoke calmly, professional, detached. He confirmed what I already suspected. Your account credentials were used to authorize the changes. Credentials, username, password, verification. All correct, all accepted. Which meant the system hadn't failed. It had followed instructions, just not mine. I asked him the only question that mattered. Can I get the money back? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. We're still investigating, he said. Not yes, not no. Investigating. That word became my reality. Days passed, then weeks. Each morning I checked my account knowing what I would see. 0. The number didn't change, but something inside me did. I stopped seeing the account as money. I started seeing it as time. Years of work, years of sacrifice, years of believing I was building something secure. Gone in seconds. And the hardest part wasn't the loss itself. It was the uncertainty. Because no one could promise it would be fixed. No one could promise it would be reversed. No one could promise anything. And for the first time since my divorce, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Exposed. Because financial security isn't just about numbers, it's about control. And control had been taken from me. Quietly, legally, systematically, without warning. But what I didn't realize yet was that the most difficult part wasn't losing the money. It was learning how the system decides who is responsible and who isn't. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Plain white envelope, no urgency in its appearance, no warning that the words inside would define what came next. I opened it slowly, already knowing it wasn't going to contain the answer I wanted. It was from the bank's fraud investigation department. The first sentence was polite, the second sentence was clear, and the third sentence was final. After reviewing your case, we have determined that the transactions were authorized using valid account credentials. At this time, we are unable to reimburse the disputed amount. I read it again, then again. The words didn't change. Unable to reimburse. I sat there at my kitchen table, holding the letter, feeling something settle deep in my chest. Not panic, not anger. Acceptance. Not because I agreed with it, but because I understood what it meant. The system had made its decision. From their perspective, the process had been followed correctly. Verification codes were entered, credentials were used, authentication was completed. It didn't matter that it wasn't me, it mattered that the system believed it was. That was enough. I wish I could say I fought it, that I hired lawyers, that I challenged the decision and won, but the truth is simpler than that. I didn't have the energy, because the money wasn't just money anymore. It had become something else. A lesson. A painful, expensive, permanent lesson about trust. Not trust in people, trust in systems, in routines, in assumptions. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding the things I could control. I closed the compromised account, opened a new one, changed every password, enabled every security feature I had ignored before. Two-factor authentication, alerts, verification protections, things I had once believed were unnecessary, things I now understood were essential. But none of those changes brought the money back. They only protected what was left. What surprised me most wasn't the financial impact, it was the emotional one. Because financial loss doesn't just change your bank balance, it changes your sense of safety. Every notification became something I watched more carefully. Every transaction became something I reviewed more closely. Trust, once broken, doesn't return easily. Not even with systems, not even with banks, not even with time. One night, a few months later, I logged into my new account. The balance wasn't large, not yet, but it wasn't zero. And for the first time since that morning in my kitchen, I felt something different. Not security, not confidence, awareness. Because I understood now what I hadn't understood before. Financial security isn't just about saving money. It's about protecting access. It's about understanding how easily control can shift. It's about knowing that systems don't recognize intentions. They recognize authentication, verification, authorization. That's all. And sometimes, The most dangerous moment isn't when something is taken, it's when you don't realize access was given. If I could go back, I would pay closer attention to every notification, every change, every detail. Not out of fear, out of responsibility. Because rebuilding money takes time, but rebuilding awareness takes something else. Experience. And experience doesn't ask permission before it teaches you. It just leaves you with the lesson. Permanent, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore. The number in my account will grow again, slowly, carefully, deliberately. But I will never forget the morning it said 0. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I learned. Have you ever checked your account and felt something wasn't right? Financial security isn't just about saving money, it's about protecting access. Share your thoughts below. Your story might help someone else stay aware.